Okay, up until now, we've been talking about essentially the very basics of source control. We've talked about how to install Mercurial, the plugin, the binaries, talked about how to set up source control with the NSF, how to commit changes to the local repository, how to make updates and see the revision numbers and figure out which one's the tip, the latest revision, how to move back and forth inside the history. We've talked about how to create a remote repository and push changes, how to connect to that remote repository and push the changes from local to remote, those kinds of stuff, and all that stuff's good stuff. That information is pretty much readily available from a lot of different places. Notes in 9, Declan Lynch has done quite a bit of stuff on this. A lot of people have made essentially the basic information available. I went ahead and repeated it because I wanted everybody to following along this series to sort of be in the same place that I am as I move forward in these advanced topics. So the last thing I want to say before I head down this advanced path, or a couple things actually. Number one, I couldn't have got to the point where I'm at without some help from other people. I was playing around with source control pretty heavily back in February, using sort of a different, I don't know, source control strategy, and it didn't seem like it was really that beneficial. So I just asked around. Declan Lynch and Nathan Freeman both spent some time with me chatting, just talking about kind of how they do stuff, and then Martin Janock spent, of all things, like 30-40 minutes with me on a Friday night, his time, like 9 o'clock, after 9 o'clock Friday night, which is, that's prime social time. He actually did a Google Hangout with me and just talked to me about, how they do source control and some of the things that he runs into with his development team and so forth. And so what I did was I took all the information from those guys and I started to apply it to what we do at Q Diligence. And over the last couple months, a lot of trends have popped up within our usage, and it's those trends that I really had in mind to share with people throughout this video series. So for those of you who are joining right in the middle, welcome. For those of you who have started at the beginning and gone through the earlier steps, welcome back. But now we're at the point where we want to talk about some things that they're a little more artistic / mechanical. So for instance, the mechanics of this are going to be the same for everybody, if how you do branching and merging and that kind of stuff. However, the sort of the art part of it is subjective. You may not need the kind of branching strategy that I'm using, and you may not choose to do it this way. But I guess the point is that at this point there are a lot of different ways to use the tool, and I'm quite certain that there are really bad ways to use it. But there probably is no one right way. So I want to talk a little bit about branching, and when there's no demo in this one, it's just talk. We're going to talk through the slide. In the next video, we'll actually go through and I'll show you what exactly it is I'm talking about. So when we first created the repo, we actually established what is known as the default branch. If you remember, in the on the repo title, it'll say default and it'll say tip, tip being the latest revision. So it has a revision number and it'll say default. Well, the default is the name of the automatic branch that gets established in the repository when you first create it. Well, not only does the repository track the history of all the revisions within a single branch, aka the default branch, you have the ability to create multiple branches. So in this screen here, you can see that I've removed or deleted the default branch, and I've created 3 other branches. There's a master branch, a development branch, and a Rust dev branch. Now, in our environment, this almost mirrors exactly what we do. The master branch we use for code that goes to production. That is the gold standard. If it's production ready to go, it ends up in the master branch. We use the master branch to update the applications as needed. We have a development branch that we may or may not use. The development branch essentially maps to our test environment. So we've got a production environment and a DR environment out there, but we also have a test environment that's in the cloud. publicly available, that kind of thing, and we use that for testing anything that we need to do performance testing that might be impacted by a wide area network connection, that kind of thing. And then in addition to that, we establish a branch for our own personal development. So in my case, I've got a Rust dev branch. That branch actually corresponds to the code stream that I'm working on at any particular time. Now, this is one of those things where some people will say, well, branches, they're really for features, meaning you want to work on a feature, you create a new branch, you do your code in that branch, and you either throw away all the code that you did in that branch and close the branch, or you move whatever code you created into the other branches, and then you eventually close your branch. Well, in our case, I kind of like having a Rust dev branch all the time. I will create another feature branch as needed, and again, the other people on the team will create their own branches. But our personal branches correspond to private internal test environments. So what you could do within a particular branch. So let's look at the Rust dev branch for a second. Once you create these branches in your designer, you can switch between branches. So you can say, oh, I want to work in the Rust dev branch right now. So you switch over to the Rust dev branch, and any changes that you make while you're in the Rust dev branch, it's just like we've talked about. You make a change to an XPage, it buffers a change. That change, when it gets committed to the current branch. So if I'm in the Rust dev branch, every time I commit, it's going to commit into the Rust dev branch. Because you can have multiple branches in a repo, as you're doing code updates and different commits, you're going to end up with various branches at various different revision numbers. So for instance, I've got revision 102 here in the Rust dev, revision 93 on the development branch, and then revision 96 on the master branch. Well, there is only one tip at any given point. However, if I switch over here to the Rust dev branch and I do a bunch of changes and I end up at revision 102, that means I've made a bunch of changes. I can switch my designer over to development branch. Well, the latest revision for the development branch is revision 93. So consequently, everything that I've done in the Rust dev branch is not automatically shared to the development branch. Matter of fact, the development branch and the Rust dev branch really don't know anything about each other than the repo knows that they both exist. In addition to that, you might actually have a situation where it's not always, the master branch is the latest. I mean, it just doesn't work out that way in real life. But my point is, you can have multiple branches. Each one of those branches has their own life cycle, their own history. The revision numbers, however, do correspond globally, and there is always one tip. And the way in real life you actually kind of do this is you set up your branches as you need, and then you go into that branch and you make some changes. So let's just say I go into the Rust dev branch here, and I make some changes, and I say, oh, that's really good, and I want to test that in our test environment. Well, at that point, what I will do is I will switch over to, in Designer, the development branch, and then I will say, okay, merge the changes from the Rust dev branch into the development branch. At that point, all of the code changes that were done in Rust dev will be pulled over into the development branch. And so now the development branch has all the code. And in fact, when you do a merge, that's like a new commit, that's a new revision. So in this case, if I actually merged from Rust dev into development, this revision number more than likely would go to 103. So it would go to one more. It would be the tip kind of a thing. In addition to that, you can merge both ways between branches. So let's just say I made a change in the development branch and I wanted to put that into the production branch. Well, I can do that. So in this top two green arrows, I'm actually showing that you can merge from the Rust dev branch into the development branch, and or you could move from the development branch or merge into the master branch. In addition, if you switch over to the master branch, you can merge changes from any other branch you want. So this middle green arrow basically says, yeah, switch over to the master branch and merge changes from the Rust dev branch. So typically you're doing new functionality, you're going to merge up. You know, again, there's no hard and fast rules, but generically. On the flip side, the other way might happen in something a little more like like real life, where, hey, a customer calls and says, hey, this one thing's not working. Okay, well we need to fix that right away. So in that case, we want the change to be done essentially on the master. We want that the gold code to be updated. And you think, well, hey Russ, why don't you move the code all the way around and put it in the development branch and all that? Well, if the Rust dev branch and the development branches are, basically in a state of flux right now, it may be a big problem to merge all the changes back and forth. So for a bug fix, we're just going to update the master branch, fix the code, and now we've got updated code in production. Life's good, everything's working. But now, once we've made that change in the master branch, that change is not in the other branches. So the green arrows show moving functionality up through the chain, so to speak, up through the branches. The red arrows are basically indicating that, hey, you can pull things down the other way too. So you can merge whichever way you want. You can move to this branch, merge changes from another branch. You can move to the first branch and move changes to the other branch. So, but the big concept here is A, creating branches, and B, if you want to pull changes from one branch to another, the way you do that is you switch to the branch you want to work in, and then you merge or you pull in or merge the changes from another branch into your current branch. That's pretty key. So when you do a merge from branch to branch, you're merging, you go into, you say, I want to work inside this branch, and I'm going to merge changes from another branch. So in reality, we actually prefer not having a default branch. We like having master development for as our two standard branches. We like having our own personal branches, and then in addition to that, we'll open and close feature branches as needed. So that's it for this video. It was a quick one, hopefully a little confusing, but it takes a little bit of introduction to kind of get it when you see the demonstration of that.